let's talk a little bit about your accelerator. You've started the accelerator last year, and you just said you acquired some of the startups, you invested in some of the startups. What are your success stories from the accelerators? What are your experience? And also tell us, how does SAP benefit from the startups? Maybe also, because you spoke a lot about India, beyond India.
SAP had this startup studio that was launched last year, and I think we've almost graduated our first batch of startups that we incubated. And it is a 12-month program that we actually ran. And I actually head up innovation for India. So I've been personally very closely working with all of these startups that we selected and we incubated. It's interesting. I mean, obviously, all of them came into SAP with a purpose in mind that they obviously had an idea. They had a technology solution associated with it. But their biggest bottleneck was, how do you integrate this with the business processes that SAP offers? So that was the intent with which they actually came into the startup studio. But I think what has happened is that we've moved as a company into exploiting technology. So we actually make technology from SAP available to these startups. We provide mentorship in terms of which direction they need to steer, both in terms of the startups catering to an Indian marketplace and also catering to a global marketplace. And those are sometimes, two different things, which is why I talked a little bit about that, because this is a recurring theme that keeps coming up when I talk to the startups. So in a sense, what we've done is the 12 startups that we had, like I mentioned before, 2 of them actually have been bought over, and essentially we're looking to invest in 2 of them. But I believe all of them have been able to grow from where they were 12 months ago to where they are today, both from a business standpoint and also from a maturity of the solution standpoint. So for us, I think one part is the startups gaining from us. But the biggest thing has been a transformation for SAP itself, right? So we're a 40-year-old company. And essentially what we wanted to bring in was the spirit of startups into the organization. So it's not just me that was involved in the startup interactions. At every level within the organization, we had product managers, we had basically architects, we had developers themselves working with these startups side by side in order to understand what motivates them. It's a two-way street. I mean, if I can get that startup culture in every project that we do at SAP, you know what, we're already a winner. And I think that is what SAP gains from it. Apart from filling the white space that I talked about, there are certain things that we don't really want to do ourselves, but we want startups to take on. The other thing is we really cater to the large enterprise segment. And a lot of the startups, the solutions that they come up with are very, very effective in the SMB segment. So what we wanted to do is, even if there is an overlap with a startup idea with what we may already have, we still want to bring them in because they cater to a different market segment that we otherwise cannot be active and effective in. So that's basically what my two cents would be.
Let me throw this now to Ramakrishna. I mean, you gave us, great overview about sensor software services, and I have a very scary idea now of how factories can look like in the future. And I was actually grateful to you, Shrikant, when you said in India it's not about replacing people, but we have a huge workforce. So that's something which is very different in Germany. Now, Bosch also started an accelerator some time ago, and I think we get an idea of what the solutions are you are looking for. But so can you be a bit more precise on what are the problems which Bosch wants to solve with the help of an accelerator, and does it impact on Bosch's culture as well to work with startups? Why do you do this whole thing?
Yeah, it's a nice question because we are a slightly older company than SAP. We are a 130 years old company. So you can understand how systems have evolved and they function at this point of time. As Bosch, we don't singly fit into either a service sector or a product sector because they're a mix of all of them. Because if you look at it, at least in India, we have Bosch in 2 forms. One is the traditional industry, and the other one is the IT wing that we have. And the traditional industry actually covers 4 major segments, right from consumer goods to automotive systems. So it's a wide range of solutions. Now, what we see with startups is they're very nimble, out of the box, and startups also bring in something called an outside-in perspective. Because the reason is, being a very old company and having very strong systems and practices, and having been reasonably successful in our business, we always tend to focus on our strengths, what's internal to us. And our innovation strategies are mostly derived on what our strengths are and how it fits into our existing forms of business. But what we look at with startups is they bring an outside-in view, and they think quite different from the way we think. So on one side, we benefit from seeing another culture. On the other side, we also do offer them a lot of benefits. So there is one aspect that you get a lot of market access across multiple domains because we are present in a number of domains. On the other side, they also get access to domain and technical expertise within the company. So in a way, we are trying to work with startups in something, as we say, it's a symbiotic relationship, or it's a mutually beneficial relationship that would eventually evolve.
But Bosch is such an empire here. Don't you suffocate the startup somehow? Can they remain independent when they're working with you?
Okay, so to make things better, firstly, I wouldn't agree that we suffocate them. But what we have done is, again, we have on one side very strict rules and methods. So what we have done is we have created something called a Bosch Startup Incubation Hub right outside our office. So we have taken some rental space, and this is one place where we have created, in fact, the entire environment looks quite different from the traditional structured approach that most German companies follow. So here we give them a very informal working place. We give them access to a lot of facilities. They're also, in fact, if somebody's working on electronic hardware, we give them access to things like EMI, EMC testing facilities. And there are experts to solve any problem of them. So I think they're quite happy working with us, and we give them a lot of freedom in this place, in this startup incubation hub that we have.
You have spent 15 years in Bangalore, over 30 years with Siemens. So somehow I think you're an institution here in Bangalore. And talking about giving space to startups, I know you are in the process of building a new factory here, and you want to use a lot of space for startups as well. And you are this pioneer for healthcare and engineering here. So how do you want to engage with startups here? What are actually the partnerships you are looking for? And how do you want to find, select, and let grow your startups here in Bangalore?
First of all, let me correct one thing. We are not building a factory. We are moving to a new building with our R&D organization, because otherwise that will create some rumors in Germany, anyway, which I would like to avoid. We are in fact moving or planning to move to a new location in Electronic City in March next year, where we have much more space available than at the moment. And we would like to utilize a part of this space to set up an incubation space for startup companies. We are a little bit, let's say, follower compared to SAP or Bosch. Our strategy in terms of startups so far was primarily, let's say, in China, USA, Germany, Israel, and now we're taking up India as well. One of the reasons being, if you look at it, the segments we operate in healthcare, it's primarily the so-called M1, M2 markets, so the high-end markets. And if you remember one of the first slide, there was one figure which I didn't explain. Our equipment provides access to 1.1 billion people in high developed countries. Global population is a little bit more, as we all know. So if we look at emerging markets, there the population adds up to about 6.6 billion. And this is what we would like also to address from India. So my overall vision for our organization here in India, I would like us to become a center of competence for emerging market products. And for that, I also need the access to the Indian startup environment, because the ideas which you get here probably are ideas which you can't develop in Germany. And this is the main reason why we would like to get into the startup environment in the healthcare sector, also to get, let's say, specific solutions for the local market here in India, and then transfer those ideas to other emerging markets like Africa, Latin America, and so on.
So in a way, you're saying that this research and this innovation can only come from here, and your center in Erlangen, Nuremberg, is not able to do this.
Exactly.
Okay, I think that's a good statement, and we can be proud of it that it's working here. Healthcare. Let me turn to JANNIS now, the midwife and samurai of the Grant for App initiative of Bayer. Now, I understand that you have developed this Grants for App initiative over the last 3-4 years, 4-5 years, okay, and only now you are coming to India. Do you think that in a way you are a latecomer? Is it maybe too late to change the buyer mindset through your journey to India? And I mean, you also underlined the difficulties you have for your products, like validation and other things which make it a bit more complicated for the healthcare sector to be present somewhere. But are you a latecomer? And if so, do you have anything to offer to the startups here?
I don't think we're a latecomer. In India, yes, because our company is not as present in this country as it is elsewhere. Simply as pharmaceutical multinationals have difficulties in the Indian market, and that's actually why we're starting to go into crop science first. It's much easier for us. Our capacities are huge when it goes into crop science, and pharmaceutical is just a very, very tiny bit of it. So we want to experiment how it works with startups in India, in crop science, and when we see it works, when it culturally, the chemistry is correct, then we also want to go into the medical space, and then we might actually tap on potentials that will give us some speed in India outside of the pharmaceutical, but more the healthcare market side. And in that sense, I would agree, yes. The question is not to be the first, but to be standing as the last one, and that's my argument against that.
Okay, that's a good one. Let me give you another question, and you raised it yourself. Apparently, innovation in healthcare seems to be a masculine-driven business. You highlighted one of the startups, Niramai, which is actually run by 2 ladies. Now, why is it that there are so few ladies working in this sector? Healthcare being something which is of interest for ladies in any case, so why is it?
Well, actually, if I look at the data that we received from all the submissions, and we had about 3,000 submissions in the past 3 years, if I just click on women's health, then we have about 80% lady CEOs, which kind of makes sense, because they know their body the best way. But in the other parts, I guess, I mean, I would love to know why it is the way it is, but my assumption is that it's still a tech-driven business that we're talking about, and I mean, if we just look at the conference here, it's also masculine-driven, and I guess that's also partially the reason for that phenomenon. But then actually in Asia, it's also more masculine-driven than in Europe. If you look at Scandinavia, for example, it's amazing. There's like almost 50-50 between men and women. I would love to have more women on board, and we always track how many lady CEOs we get, and we're always happy to have more than in the previous year. We do a lot in women's health. That's how we try to support that. But other than that, can't comment on that too much.
Okay, I just wanted to throw this to everybody's food for thought. Thank you very much for that. Let me now turn to Professor Lehmann. You spoke about the Digitization Center, ideas of cross-innovation, and you asked upon everybody to find the Indian way. Now, I think you're really in all the universities we have in Bavaria. Hof is really the champion in working with companies doing applied science, doing startup incubation. Now, what are your aspirations for startup cooperations now, not the Indian way, but between Germany and India? Do you see Karnataka and Bangalore as a maybe strategic partner for you and the digitization center you are establishing?
I think it's necessary that young people with good ideas should contact the companies here. You have some examples here, and to see which are the interests of these companies, what are the chances, what are the gaps in these companies. In the digital world in the future, we have a lot of problems. For example, data security, or a lot of other different things. That's the same in Germany as here in India. And then that's a good chance, maybe going to any companies with a very strong link to Germany and see what are the interests in my country in Germany as well as the interests here in India. And these are the chances for both sides to invent some new ideas how to solve these problems. And the problems are really, really huge. We don't have enough rules for these huge data. We don't have really a data security. We discuss a lot about Industry 4.0, but did you really know what it is? Did you really know which are the problems for the future, for the human beings, for society 4.0? A lot of questions, of course. I can't give any answer today, but I think the collaboration between Germany, Bavaria especially, and Karnataka, for example, we have a very strong link between the both states, could help for the future. The young Indian students at my university in Bavaria, for example, come with new ideas to India. You can see the you can use the context to some what is happening in Germany, because a lot of students at universities of applied science had to have an internship in a German company, and so I get some ideas. So use these chances. We have an office here in Bangalore, for example, the Bavarian Indian Center. Contact it and see what we can do together.
Okay, can you be a bit more precise? I mean, we listened to the gentleman talking about their accelerators. Germany has a great tradition in having cooperation between universities and industry. What is the benefit of academia involvement in startup promotion compared to what the industry does itself?
Well, the chances are the research centers. We have, for example, at my universities, different research centers with special projects financed by the industry, for example, and there they work on the different problems for a special problem, for example. And then there the young people invent something new, and it's often the origin of a new idea for a new startup and so on. So seeking all these research centers, for example, could help to link between the universities and the companies. And these links are very, very important. Otherwise, you only have theoretical discussion, but you need practical discussion. And this practical discussion could help for new innovation, and that's the benefit in the collaboration between universities and companies.
So you asked about what do universities bring to the table in terms of closer collaboration. I'll give you two examples in the Indian context. IIT Bombay has an accelerator where they actually work with startups. And a very simple invention that they were able to incubate was related to actually saline drips that you have in hospitals. The biggest problem that you have right now is there are air bubbles that form in those, and fundamentally they could be life-threatening. And they had come up with a way of starting and stopping these drips at a cost of 400 rupees per one of those apparatus. And for an Indian context, it is amazing that they can bring it down to that level and actually make a business out of it. And they also had done something in terms of remote, blood samples that can be read by doctors remotely. They have rolled this out in the Indian context. I think it's important that the universities are in a better position to incubate these things. And I think it's industry that needs to tap into this to bring it into the mainstream. I think both are important, but there are a lot of examples of this nature that happen with industry collaboration. Yeah.
Speaking from the Berlin perspective, I actually think that the universities and also the government is doing much less than is needed, and especially the technology transfer is a tedious process and completely, I don't like it, and it's very difficult to negotiate with the universities when it comes to taking the innovations from the university and putting them into a legal private entity. And I feel like we have almost zero touching points when it comes to that, because it's still, the framework is not given.
Well, that's one of the reasons why we have this special center to bring these ideas from the research centers to the industry via young people, for example. Of course, that could be startups, but of course that also can be a new employer in a company, for example. But if you fail with a startup, for example, you are an excellent expert for the company then as well. Because being a good businessman means you should have failed once, twice, maybe.
And maybe not talking about the big corporates. I know that many of the small and medium-sized companies in Germany, they have excellent relationships with universities because in a way, universities are their startups because they do research and innovation for them, which they can't do because they are too small.
I mean, if I look at Germany, I wouldn't fully agree with your view because like everything, I mean, there are also exceptions. I recently visited in Munich, the Technological University of Munich, and they have a program called Unternehmertum, and TUM, Technological University of Munich, where they have a cooperation between the university and industry partners. From Siemens, for example, we have about 6-7 programs running there, and their success rate is extremely high in the way they are doing it in cooperation, university with industry, with students who had the idea is amazing. So there are areas where good things are done between academia and industry, that there always can be more effort. Yeah, I agree.
And let's turn again to our conventional firms like Bosch and like Bayer. And my question to both of you would be, how easy was it to convince your top management in your respective companies to engage with startups, to have this sort of cooperation? And do you think it's a bigger challenge for you as sort of conventional firms to co-innovate with startups than for others?
Okay, we really didn't have a challenge on this because it is a very top-down driven approach. This initiative to be more nimble and think like a startup initially came with our in-house approaches, wherein we were trying to have internal startups, like try to create entrepreneurship. But again, we realized that this is not the only way to move forward because there's a lot more work happening outside. So what we have is we have now an integrated approach, which we call it as a DNA platform. So we call this our innovation program, and we call this Discover, Nurture, and Align. So this works both for employees who want to think and work like a startup for a short duration, who also go to the same incubation hub that I mentioned earlier. And then we also have startups who come there. So in the process, both of them get to know each other's styles of working, and then we stand to gain. And initially, yes, it was also initiated in Germany. So we already had initiatives called Robert Bosch Venture Capital, which was mostly taking care of investing in external startups. And then we also had another program called BOSP, called Bosch Startup Platform. So there were initiatives which had run, and then India was pretty fast to adopt the same in our local context. And it's running pretty successful. And in fact, everyone appreciates this fact. We have very often pitch events, and then the middle management and the senior management seems to have very easily accepted the fact that, yes, we need to work together with startups and work for, it's possible that, again, many of the startups fail because we say 90% of startups usually fail, irrespective of having a great idea or a great technology. It's possible that the business model just doesn't work. And so I think the experience of companies who have survived for a long time in the field go to help in making these startups successful. So people say, yes, we need the ideas from there. We also need to help them. And then we also look at how do we together take a product to market. So it could be multiple relationships. It could be a supplier-customer relationships, or joint solution providers. Or if it works, at some point of time, we can make an investment in this organization and take an equity, which we haven't yet gone so far, at least in the Indian context. But there are multiple ways we look at it. So as far as management buy-in is concerned, we really didn't have a challenge on this.
So the tanker Bosch moves fairly quickly. What about the tanker Bayer?
Well, we started as an organic project. It was not top-down at all. It was basically a colleague of mine saying we need to do something in digital health, and then starting up like a startup himself inside the organization. And then I joined, and another colleague joined as well, and then we got bigger and bigger and bigger, and we tried to go into kind of like a hyper-growth phase, and now we cover the entire company. I guess part of that And actually, in the beginning, in 2013, 2012, when we started thinking about this, a lot of people said it doesn't make sense to combine pharmaceuticals with digital health, because these are very two different things. But we said the future of health will be different, even though that's very buzzwordy, but it will be different, and making more pharmacological products will be more difficult in the future. So it makes sense for us to look out into this digital health scene. And we kept being perseverant on what we do. We were consistent. We were extremely careful with our wordings, with our communications. And our team is quite diverse, with a millennials, Cuban, and a business consultant. And that's a very good combination to keep up the pace, but also the politics inside this large organization. Because if any one of you has ever worked for a big corporate, you know which frustration levels you can hit. And you just have to keep on going.
Thank you. Now let me throw the same question to Siemens and SAP. I mean, in a way, you are maybe more international, have a more international work culture. So was it easier for you to convince your management to go into this?
I would say yes. I mean, if I look at the history, we have a startup organization within our corporate technology. We have offices in Shanghai, in Tel Aviv, in the Bay Area. So, and then if you look at the statistics, I mean, Bangalore in the meantime is globally number 3 when it comes to startup hubs. And only looking at this, I mean, it, I would say, was a no-brainer to set something similar up here in Bangalore as well.
SAP?
Yeah, so our journey actually started with Palo Alto. So we have a big location in Palo Alto, and obviously that was the hotbed of startups. And I think there's a lot of success that SAP has tasted by the very fact that we've engaged with startups. And I think that became more of a global thing from an SAP standpoint. So I don't think we had to do any convincing to have a startup studio in Bangalore. Yes, it was effort on our side, but now I think we have a huge one in Berlin as well that we've set up, and one here in Bangalore, and Palo Alto flourishes as usual.